I want to welcome all of you to the meeting today to take up House Bill 800. And I want to apologize for us being late. That happens up here when you get a long, drawn-out bill sometime, and it is the American system that everybody has their say, you know, and always understands it better. Before I start, I'd like to do something a little different here. I'd like to ask my good friend Amos Amerson to stand up and be recognized. He's a great American and served in the military, and he serves now with us, and so I appreciate him being here. I want to explain a little bit why we are where we are. As you probably remember, I followed the usual practice of passing around bills and anybody signed them as a co-sponsor. And then I should have checked with some people I respect very much, and later on they let two or three of them let me hear from them about their feelings that the change that we're making in the bill here about the service in the National Guard. And so they'll probably speak on that. And so that was my reason for holding up. And then the governor asked me to come in to his office and talk to him, and his couple of his staff members has given us strong arguments as why he thought it was necessary that his bill be passed. And so today, one of his two floor leaders is kind of unusual. I was going to brag a little bit until we got all messed up. I think was going to have unanimous attendance today before we got all messed up over there, and I was going to tell you it's unusual to have two floor leaders in a small committee like this, but two governor's floor leaders. But anyway, one of them here will present the bill. So with that, we'll recognize Representative Hatchett to present his bill, and then we'll go from there. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Yates, members of the committee. I bring to you today, it's House Bill 800. It is substitute version LC 211616-ECS. What this bill does is it removes from the existing law the the individual that is being considered for Assistant Adjutant General does not have to meet the qualifications of having 5 years of continuous service in the Army or Air National Guard. The bill will state, as it says here, is that that the nominee shall be a federally recognized officer with the rank of lieutenant colonel or higher. If the nominee has been retired, then the retired person must have reached the rank of lieutenant colonel also, and may have been resigned from the Georgia National Guard, the active Army, or the active Air Force. What this does is it will allow our governor to have a larger pool to choose from when he's appointing an Assistant Adjutant General. And that being said, that's the bill.
I thought at one point the governor, somebody made the point that thought it would add a much-needed pool of other people to consider. Is that, do you have any statistics on that or anything that you want to add on that? Or?
I do not have any specific statistics on it. Do we have any statistics? No, I don't.
Okay.
No, sir.
Does anybody have a question of the representative? No questions? All right, we'll now, thank you, sir. We'll get back to you there. We'll hear from anybody else who is for the bill, and come up to the podium and tell us who you are and where you're from, and tell us your reasons for being for the bill.
Mr. Chairman, while I don't have my name is Russell Carlson. I serve as Deputy Adjutant General to
Yes, sir. Yeah, come on up.
Sir, while I have no formal testimony prepared right here now by design, I did feel as I feel obligated to identify myself in the crowd, in attendance, should any questions arise through the course of the committee process. I just felt I should properly identify myself, and will yield to any further questions of the committee as it goes forward.
Do you have any comments for the bill or anything else? Is everything covered to your satisfaction?
Yes, sir. I'm very satisfied with the discretion this gives the governor, and think it's a wise decision on his part, and fully support its passage.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask anybody who is opposed to the bill to come up and give us your name and address, name and where you're from, and give your reasons for being opposed to the bill.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Robert C. Hughes, Jr. I'm a Major General retired from the Georgia Army National Guard after 37 years of service. I live in Macon, Georgia, and I appreciate the opportunity to address this committee today. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm here today to represent the men and women of the Georgia National Guard, both Army and Air, who as service members must maintain silence in matters of this nature. Within the next few minutes, I hope to convey to each of you that the passage of House Bill 800 is not in the best interest of the men and women who serve in the Georgia National Guard, nor the Georgia National Guard as an organization, nor the state of Georgia. In fact, in my opinion, the passage of this bill into law will solidify the concept of patronage into a State Department which today, gentlemen, demands the highest caliber of leadership available. What we have witnessed over the past few months and weeks with the appointment of the current Adjutant General and the Assistant Adjutant General, Deputy Adjutant General, whatever we call it, I think he's called, Commander of the Army Guard, is appalling. And it leaves Georgia and the Georgia Army National Guard in a vulnerable position. As I go forward here, maybe this will become more clear to you. Please understand 4 key points. First, it appears that the Adjutant General and the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General of the Commander of the Army Guard did not meet the eligibility requirements for appointment as outlined in the state law. There's been some question, as I said a moment ago, as to whether or not, as to which title the gentleman here, the general officer, is using. I'm not sure if he's the Assistant Adjutant General, the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General, Commander of the Army National Guard. It doesn't matter. It appears from all that I see that he is, in fact, performing the duties as the Assistant Adjutant General. Second point, neither the current Adjutant General nor the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General are qualified to be federally recognized as general officers in any branch of the active or reserve component system. This lack of federal recognition leadership can and will have tremendous impact on the State Department of Defense as well as the state in general. Third point, House Bill 800 does nothing to correct the issue of federal recognition. In fact, it does nothing to prevent the continued selection of retired active duty or reserve component duty officers to prevent the ATAG to enable him to meet the qualifications to be federally recognized as a general officer. Fourth point, the current 5-year continuous service in the Georgia Army National Guard requirement as it stands in the legislation today is proper and it's necessary. It's a necessary statutory requirement. Let me now focus on the ATAG position. The current Deputy Assistant Adjutant General, Correction Army Commander, is with us today, completed 20 active military service years. and he was retired from the U.S. Army as a lieutenant colonel. I do commend General General Gerard, and I thank you for your service. Because he is a retired active duty officer, he could not be assessed into the Georgia Army National Guard. Gentlemen, he's retired. He was appointed by the governor to the rank of brigadier general because he could not get into the Georgia Army Guard. He was appointed in the State Defense Force, and he wears that uniform as we sit here today. He is not in the Georgia National Guard. His appointment as a general officer in the State Defense Force, to many of us, appears to be a pure political act. The governor can appoint anybody to a general officer position in the State Defense Force, yourselves included. No military requirement, past military requirement is required. The State Defense Force is a separate paramilitary organization that supports the state and local communities in the time of emergencies and disaster. General Gerard's post-active duty assessment into the Georgia National Guard is totally unprecedented in this state. It will require, as I understand it, a recall to duty, and that will be granted by the United States Department of Defense, possibly by the Secretary of Defense, if it in fact is granted. As of today, to my knowledge, this recall has not occurred, and that is the reason he is still wearing the State Defense Force uniform. Now, even if granted a recall and assessed into the Georgia Army National Guard, General Gerard is not eligible immediately for federal recognition as a general officer. To ensure that the quality of all officers, to include general officers, reserve component officers, such as General Thielman and myself, were required and are required to meet the same standards that active duty officers are required to meet. These standards include military education, experience with troops, command of troops. In the case of a general officer federal recognition, it requires a review of one's personal background behavior. The lack of our ATAG being federally recognized as a general officer has serious implications and possible repercussions for the National Guard in Georgia and the state as a whole. You see, the Adjutant General of the state of Georgia has to spend time working and competing for resources within the military establishment in Washington, D.C., to include National Guard Bureau. This individual will sit at resource and tables with federally recognized general officers all the way to the 3-star level. And guess what? Those officers will be in uniform. Our ATAG, as it stands today, will be in a business suit because he cannot legally wear the rank that he has on his shoulder today outside of the state of Georgia. Or if in uniform, he must wear his lieutenant colonel rank, the rank he was given before retiring. He will be wearing that lieutenant colonel rank during these discussions of resources coming into Georgia. The bottom line that I'm talking about, gentlemen, is credibility. I'm talking about credibility among peers when resourcing discussions are going on. I'll tell you from my experience, he'll have one arm tied behind him in a knife fight at that table. Georgia's credibility within the broader military circles will also be diminished. With the rumors of the BRAC process and force structure changes that are coming to the Army and the Army National Guard, where will our state be? Where will we be in the food chain for resources? And we're talking about dollars, and we're talking about job possibilities in the state of Georgia. And what does this say, gentlemen, to all the hard-working soldiers within the Georgia National Guard who were required to meet all federal recognition requirements before they were promoted to the next rank? It says it's okay for senior leadership to be exempt from standards. Those only apply to those of you who are below us. It's not right. Now, is this a lesson in leadership or what? You know, we have a creed in the military, an ethos, that you never ask a soldier to do something that a leader doesn't have to do. The bottom line of this part of my discussion is that House Bill 800 does not even address the federal recognition issue. It will allow those who are not federally recognized to continue to serve as ATAG. Unfortunately, what the bill does is it eliminates the requirement that the tag must have served at least 5 years of continuous service in the Georgia Air or Army National Guard at the time of his or her appointment. In effect, it will open the appointment to any federal recognized lieutenant colonel, Army, Air, wherever, or higher, to include the active duty force, Army Reserve, Air Reserve, any reserve force, or anybody from any state. It's totally open. You heard the argument a moment ago that my friend Representative Hatchett proposed, that the bill that's proffered would provide the governor a wider pool of applicants from which to select future ATAGs. Frankly, in my opinion, this is a total misrepresentation of the true issue at stake. This bill doesn't necessarily provide the governor with any additional pool of officers qualified for federal recognition at the general officer level. Please understand that an active duty lieutenant colonel does not possess the experience or the qualifications to meet federal general officer recognition requirements, which include senior level command and education requirements, i.e. the Army War College or the Air War College. Active component lieutenant colonels are not promoted, gentlemen, from lieutenant colonel to brigadier general overnight. In addition, lieutenant colonels have usually completed 20 or more years of active service, as in the case of the good general here, and have been retired from federal service. Retired. A retired Army Air officer is not eligible to join the Army or the Air Guard unless a waiver is granted, as I explained earlier. Unprecedented. Unprecedented in this state and throughout the United States. This is a most unusual request, and there is no guarantee that this waiver will be granted. I'm sure they're working hard to see that it is. As a result, the officer may never be able to serve in the Georgia National Guard. This bill could create a situation where you have an ATAG that will never be able to wear the 1-star or 2-star rank outside of the state of Georgia. Will never be federally recognized as a general officer. Unless a waiver is granted in this case, he will never become a Georgia Guardsman and will never secure federal recognition. I point out again that General Gerard is not a Georgia Guardsman. He is in the SDF. Should he be granted a waiver, it will take several years for him to complete the military education requirements to become federally recognized as a general officer. He will never have the troop command experience prior to that time that general officers usually earn. In addition, if by some chance a waiver is granted, a retired active duty officer must forfeit his retirement income or a portion thereof during the period he serves as ATAG. Certainly, this will shrink the pool of applicants for the governor should this legislation be passed. Who would give up a general officer retirement income or a lieutenant colonel or full colonel income to take this job? There are other reasons that a retired or a prior active duty officer should not be appointed as ATAG, but I won't belabor the point here. I should include, however, that the fact that the current statute 5-year experience requirement equips one with a deep appreciation and an understanding of the unique roles and missions of the National Guard. And it certainly generates credibility among the soldiers whom he leads. Obviously, previous legislators felt that it was important, this 5-year requirement, and a necessary requirement. And guess what? It served us pretty darn good for years. I think it's an interesting question that begs an answer to ask, why do we need to change the requirement? It served us well. The Georgia National Guard is a unique organization with a long history and a unique culture. I'll tell you, having served as a Georgia Guardsman, as a deputy commander of 1st United States Army, there are issues to include employment, family care and readiness, community networks, political issues at the local level, and other civil and military issues that an active duty officer coming from the active force has never experienced and has no concept of. Yet you're going to put him in that position. Serving as a National Guard liaison was part of my mission essential task list for the 1st Army Commander. And I was constantly explaining to him the nuances of how the Georgia Army National Guard works. You see, the active service has not experienced this. An officer stepping into the reserve component from the active component will face a steep learning curve. And I'm not sure that without serving some time in the Georgia Army National Guard before stepping into that leadership role, he'll ever develop a true sense of challenges and a true sense of what the soldiers and the airmen and the airwomen are all about. It's sort of like if you take a successful newspaper editor and all of a sudden put him in a television station to run it. Well, I know a lot about the news, but guess what? I don't know jack about the television industry. I do know the news. Same and a trite analogy, but true. Understanding the culture of the organization and the life of its members are essential qualities to any successful senior military leader. In summary, gentlemen and lady, I don't think this bill is about expanding the pool of candidates for selection of appointment. I think it's obvious that the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General was illegally appointed. I think the bill, if not illegally, unethically may be a better term. I think this bill is a method to rectify that appointment. We're not talking about a bigger pool. We're talking about bigger things here. In many of our opinions, this bill is a pure patronage maneuver that totally disregards the critical need for leadership, senior leadership in today's military environment. That need is to appoint qualified officers who meet the criteria for federal recognition as a general officer and who have a deep and longing appreciation for the Georgia National Guard and its membership. There are a number already, gentlemen, of highly qualified Georgia Army Guardsmen who could have been considered for this assignment. What are we telling those young officers? Guess what? You'll never make it to the top. Many have recent combat experience, some even in 2 theaters, gentlemen. And they are federally recognized, hold the paperwork. They completed the War College. And they are eligible for federal recognition. And some are even general officers today working in guard assignments outside the state with combat experience, wearing stars legally. They're working in highly respected national level guard assignments. Gentlemen, they are in that pool, but nobody looked at them. The problem is they were never looked at. The men and women of the Georgia National Guard certainly deserve the most experienced, most qualified leadership available. Don't forget, gentlemen, we are at war. This is just as much about ethics in state government as it is leadership. I am really appalled that we are picking and choosing here titles and working the law. It all amounts to subterfuge in many of our opinions.
Where is that coming from?
It seems to me that for years in this state, and I've been around a few, not many, we've been talking about and trying to figure out how do we establish ethical government? How do we do this? I'm going to tell you, folks, it starts right here today in this room, and it starts with your vote on this bill. It starts with each of you doing what is right. And gentlemen, this bill is wrong. It's wrong. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. God bless you in this great state.
Would you stand for some questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Coomer from the 14th District up in Floyd and Bartow counties. General Hughes, thank you for your service, first and foremost. I appreciate you and the commitment you've made to our country and our community. I didn't hear in the beginning, I don't think I heard you tell us what your role was with the National Guard. I understand you're retired now, but are you a former TAG?
No, sir. I enlisted in the Georgia Army National Guard in 1967, a student in North Georgia College, and completed OCS 1968 Fort Benning. Later came up through the Guard ranks, called active duty to Desert Storm, commanding 2nd Battalion, 121st Infantry. I later served under General Thielman, who was the commander of the 48th Brigade. I was his deputy commander. I later took command of the 48th Brigade. I then went to 1st United States Army as a deputy commander of 1st United States Army at Fort Gillem.
Okay. So the bulk of your experience as an officer was on active duty then?
The bulk, yes, sir.
Okay. And you retired from active duty?
I retired from the Georgia Army National Guard.
Okay. I guess, all right. That's
Yeah.
fine.
I was a guardsman at 1st Army. That was my assignment. I was
All
a
right.
reserve component deputy commander.
Okay. Okay. I understand. Thank you very much. I wanted to get into a couple of the comments that you made, really some specific questions. You mentioned early on that you mentioned a reference to general officers not being qualified to be recognized by the Federal Department of Defense, and you made that statement in connection specifically to the current TAG, General Butterworth, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, yes, sir, both of them.
There's my understanding that all tags, all of the state appointed tags and the one that's elected over in South Carolina are all recognized as major generals upon appointment. Is that your understanding as well?
No, sir.
Okay. And I understand that you're specifically saying that we will be at a disadvantage by having an appointed tag who does not who has not served as a general officer previously. But
no, sir. I did not say that. What I said was we will be at a disadvantage if we don't have a tag or an A tag who is federally recognized.
Okay. And again, my understanding of the law, which I have researched, is that all tags are recognized as major generals at DOD. In fact, there's some pretty specific retirement regulations that have to do with a tag retiring and having to revert back to his rank previous to being tag, if the only reason he was a major general is because it was his assignment as a tag. So I think that you are incorrect on that point with regard to tags. Now, as to A tags, I don't understand all of the intricacies of that, but I do want to get into some other issues. It sounded to me as you testified today that really your complaint is specifically about General Girard being assigned to the position and less about this bill today. And I understand that you may want to see General Girard removed, or maybe you're not happy with his appointment. Of course, we as this committee and this General Assembly don't have that authority. So I'm not sure how the bill that is before us, 800, addresses what I think is your ultimate, what would be your ultimate goal of having General Girard removed.
No, sir. I'm not at all suggesting that. And obviously, I didn't do a good job because you didn't hear what I said, sir. What I did was I'm telling you that if you take General Girard's situation and you look at the bill, this bill does not address the issue of federal recognition. Okay,
correct.
Without federal recognition and being addressed in House Bill 800, then we are set up to have non-federally recognized general officers serving as a tag of the Georgia Army National Guard. First issue. Okay. The second issue is House Bill 800 deletes the 5-year requirements. That's my main two messages to you, sir.
For
not
service
about
in the Guard.
General Girard.
It's a 5-year requirement for service in the Guard, but it wouldn't,
Yes, sir.
It wouldn't eliminate the requirement of the person being a lieutenant colonel. This is already in the code. The person has to be a lieutenant colonel or above.
Yes, sir.
And so it doesn't eliminate that. And I can't imagine a scenario where a person gets to be lieutenant colonel or above without having served at least 5 years in a branch of the military service, either as active, reserve, or Guard.
Yes, sir. But you're again missing my point. My point is One must serve in the Georgia Army or Air National Guard to develop the not institutional knowledge and appreciation, to make the relationships, to bond with soldiers, to understand the organization. Leaders in my career that have worked themselves from the bottom through the organization can lead in a much more effective manner.
Well, I appreciate that's your assessment of it. My question, one more question and then another comment, because I didn't let you finish, and I apologize, on your career experience. When did you actually retire?
I came back from Albania. I was, I guess it's been 2004.
Okay. Then you probably have seen some of the progression that we've had in recent years in federal and state service, active duty, reserve, and guard. The progression toward really a blurring of the lines and the roles between
You're
guard
talking
and
about
reserve.
jointness. Yes, sir.
Well, no, jointness refers to interaction between sister services. I'm not talking about joint as in Air Force, Navy, Army. I'm talking about the blurring of the lines between guard, reserve, and we don't call them active duty now. We call them, I'm Air Force Reserve, we call active duty Air Force members regular Air Force now because we're so blended.
Yes, sir, and that started about 1970.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And
That
so,
move, the total Army concept goes back years. Yes,
right.
Sir. That's nothing new.
Right, exactly. And so those unique roles and missions have been further coalescing over time, so that really to be an effective member of the military, you're going to have to be able to interact with and participate as a guardsman, a reservist, or a regular Army member, regular Air Force member. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll give you one anecdotal point. My brothers are both Army veterans. The older of my two younger brothers was on active duty, or regular Army, served in Iraq in 2004, 2005, came out, was in the IRR. He got called up in 2009, 2010, and was attached to a Florida National Guard unit. Now, he'd never been in the Guard at all, but the point is he had a year's worth of actual Guard experience with the Florida Guard unit, having never served in the National Guard. And the point I'm getting at is, I think that it's my opinion that the focus on the distinction of Guard versus Reserve versus regular Army or Air Force is a distinction that current circumstances have somewhat made a historical distinction. I understand the difference in the service requirements and so forth, but really to do the job, you've got to be able to do the job of an Army member of the Guard, Reserve, or regular Army. So doesn't it actually increase the effective readiness of the National Guard units to make available to them a commander who has served many years on active duty or many years on reserve duty?
Sir, we've got National Guardsmen today in Georgia that have just as much active duty time almost as anybody else. No, sir, you don't have to go outside the state. You don't have to go outside the state. We've got qualified people here.
And the last point I would make is possibly in your position and having retired from the Guard, you may not have heard, as I have as a representative, really a very tremendous hue and cry from rank and file guardsmen about the way the Guard had been run in recent years. Now, I did not have the advantage of knowing the prior tag or the prior Army A tag, and I'm not here to criticize anything they did, but I will say that there was great relief expressed to me from rank and file members, and I'm not talking about colonels and generals, I'm talking about majors and E3s and on down, who expressed to me great hope and relief that we had new blood coming into the Guard to help clear up some of the really systemic problems. And I think that's exactly what this bill would allow for, is the kind of new blood, new thinking that we can get from having someone outside the organization come in and give us a breath of fresh air. You see it in private sector all the time. And as you said, we're not trying to take a baker and teach him the news. We're going from one, in your example, we're going from a newsman in the paper to a newsman in the TV. And it may be a little different way of doing business, but ultimately it's the same job, and they're still working toward the same goals. I think that I appreciate your concern, and I think that ultimately I disagree with it. And I will say this last point, and I want to say this respectfully. but I take real umbrage at your repeated assertions of unethical behavior and even the insinuation of illegal activity by the current administration or its appointees in this political debate, this political discussion. I appreciate that you have a different perspective and opinion, and it's very strongly held, and I appreciate that. But I think you've crossed a line by trying to point or paint with a brush of impropriety the people who are doing their best to serve our country and our state. So thank you for your time.
Well, may I respond to that, please, sir?
Sure.
Two things. Number one is I'm not sure what went on in the last administration, last TAGS administration. I've heard the same stories you have. Probably no more than you do about that anyway. But the organization wasn't broken. We're talking people. We're not talking organization and process. The organization process is in place as a good one. And you can't tell me that every person coming off act duty is going to be great, okay? I mean, we can get good eggs and bad eggs, just like you can get good eggs and bad eggs.
Sure.
Secondly, the ethical situation, if I've offended you, I apologize.
Not offended
but
me.
I'm going to tell you something. That is the perspective down I-75, okay? That's the message I came to deliver. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Before we go any further, I should have told us at the beginning, but we are operating, some of you may not have a copy of this, operating from the substitute to House Bill 800. It's LC 211616 ECS, and there's two changes on here from the original bill. Was down on line 13 where it takes out the provision of requiring 5-year service in the Army or Air National Guard. And the other change is at the end of the second page where it changes it when the act becomes effective. Before it said it left that out, and normally the lawyers tell us it's effective July the 1st if it's not stated. So this would be effective upon the signature of the governor. Now at this time we'll hear from Representative Collins, who's another member of the governor's floor leader, and he recently served over in the Near East, and I'd like to hear from Representative Collins.
Gentlemen, I apologize, sir. Did you leave the well, or do you care to answer more questions?
I thought I'll be glad to come
Okay,
back.
that's fine, sir. I wish you would. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you for coming and testifying today. It's been a long day for us, so I'm trying to gather my thoughts as we go forward. Let me correct something, and I've got a few questions here that won't hopefully keep too long. You were basically an AGR for most of your career, correct?
No, sir. I was an M-Day soldier.
Okay, explain the difference.
I was a 30-year. I was the chief United States probation officer for the Middle District, Georgia, for 30 years.
So when you went to the First Army, were you still working your probation? Were you doing
yes, sir.
an IMA?
I was an M-Day soldier.
Okay, so from an Air Force perspective, you were an IMA, an individualized mobile. And that was where you served your different time throughout the year?
That's close enough for discussion.
Close enough for discussion. Okay, thank you. One question, and one of the things around here we vote on words on paper. Mm-hmm. And you made a comment just a minute ago, and I was just curious about, was there ever a point made by the author of this bill that said that this dealt with the federal ascension process?
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't see anything that.
So to bring it up is saying that this doesn't affect that. That's not a part of this. The federal ascension process is no part of the Georgia legislature, correct?
No, sir.
It's
You cannot grant federal recognition.
Exactly. So there's no way we could put a bill up here that would alleviate that condition, correct?
Yes, sir. No, sir. Incorrect. You could require that the person that the governor appoints into the position be qualified to be federally recognized.
But at this point, this person has not been deemed as not federally qualified, correct?
Right, sir.
Thank you. Did you you mentioned, and being as one who just came back from the AOR recently,
Mm-hmm.
And a question that came up that I believe, fully in serving as a reservist at Dobbins as well, in which the lines are blurred, and we have many commanders from both Army and Air Force and regular and reserve. Would you not say in the contingent environment that we are facing today that deployment experience is a good thing?
Definitely.
Okay. were you aware that the previous Army ATAG never deployed?
Definitely.
So do you think the governor was mistaken in appointing her as an Army ATAG?
At the time?
Yes.
Because, well, you're going into an area that I can tell you I would not have appointed her.
Okay.
However, it's not based on deployment.
Okay, but sir, in a question we're making here, because you made the comment about in your discussion concerning the ability and the fitness of officers serving in there, and the
Right.
and I don't grant you that there's not many able folks who have done that and are still serving the current Georgia National Guard.
Sure.
But I think, and my question is did 4 or 5 years ago when that appointment was made, did you have vehement objections at that point to representing an Army ATAC who had never deployed? When we had troops who had not once but twice and going on 3 times deployment from the Army Guard,
Never knew she wouldn't deploy.
or had previous deployment experience.
Right. She could have stepped down and deployed.
Okay, but did she ever have previous deployment experience?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and again, going into a war zone experience, your leading Army ATAC was basically a non-deployable asset at that rank.
Exactly, and I wasn't consulted about appointment.
But did you make your voice known at that point
No,
about
sir,
the
I did
governor's
not.
bad selection?
No, sir. But I've learned.
Okay, I understand. Good answer. I like that.
It's true.
And I understand. Not disputing
We
your
have
facts
sat by too long.
in this situation. And I appreciate you being here, and I think this is giving that opportunity.
Thank you.
Are there not tags and assistant tags, ATAGs, who go to the Pentagon in civilian uniforms?
There are, and many of those that I say many because there's not a lot. Some of those that you see have reached the age of 65
Right.
when they retire. They can no longer carry federal recognition. However, they are known and have served as federally recognized general officers, and they still carry that status and persona when they go there.
At that point, when we were dealing, you made several issues concerning federal recognition, BRAC, and other, distinctions. One, BRAC has not come back yet. We're still anticipating that, but we're not seeing.
Rumor of BRAC.
Oh, there's
and if you
always-
live in Warner Robins, you better believe the rumors are popping.
Well, I think the latest BRAC, the last BRAC actually helped out Warner Robins, and they ought to be excited about that,
I
which
don't
I
think
am
they're
for
real
them.
excited. They're not real. Would you be excited to see the surgeon coming to you?
Well, last time when they got 30,000 extra troops in there,
Understand.
because I served
Understand.
in that
Roger.
branch.
I got it.
And so, and also Columbus as well.
Yes, sir.
And others. So I think there's also the heart of having the issue of also being a forceful and a believable ATAG in this situation, which I believe the current ATAG, and in that slide as well as General Gerard would be, would hold a seat at the table. Also the governor, and also isn't BRAC also a great deal looking at your federal officers, your your senators from Georgia, your congressmen from Georgia, which have a great deal to play as far as, and also Valdosta is living proof that a city can come together and turn back a BRAC.
Yes, sir. But you've got to have representatives up there fighting. Those are the people we're talking about.
And that's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay.
All right. That's all the question I have at this time.
Thank you. Representative, I thought we got one punch done. No one has a question. No, I do have one quick. All right. I'll give your name.
Right, Representative Rogers, District 10.
How you do, sir?
I'm fine, sir. First of all, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your service to this country. And just one quick question, so I can get my hands around this. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on the chain of command. Who sits at the top of the chain of command?
In which, all right,
I'm
From
talking.
the
I'm talking.
perspective-
I'm talking in the state of Georgia.
in the state of Georgia, commander-in-chief is the governor of the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay? The uniqueness of the Army and Air, the uniqueness of the National Guard is that it is a dual-hatted organization. Okay? 50-50. The President of the United States is the commander-in-chief in hat 1. The governor of the state of Georgia for state missions is the commander-in-chief, hat 2. That's the uniqueness between the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve. The Army Reserve does not have a state mission.
As the commander-in-chief, would it be your opinion that the governor should be able to make his appointments?
Yes, sir. If he appoints the qualified people. If he appoints the right and qualified people, then he should do all day long. And if he conforms to the statute.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any others? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, anyone else that wants to speak against the bill? This is Brigadier General Bill Thielman, who is one of the persons that brought this to my attention at the beginning, among a few others. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm William Thielman. Pleasure for me to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity. I have 30 years military experience, including active duty, Army Reserve, and Army National Guard. My National Guard time was in the Georgia National Guard, and most of that time was in the 48th Brigade. I want to say at the outset that until just a few minutes ago, I've never met Assistant Adjutant General Gerard. I've never met Adjutant General Butterworth. I have no reason to question their competency, their capabilities. This is not about personalities. This is about procedure and process and Georgia Code. There's a reason why Georgia Code 38-2-152 states that the ATAG, quote, shall be a federally recognized officer with the rank of lieutenant colonel or higher with not less than 5 years continuous service in the National Guard of this state. Assistant AG Gerard is certainly federally recognized at lieutenant colonel and higher. We can discuss the question on whether our Adjutant General meets that qualification. That's a discussion for another time. The National Guard is a unique military organization with unique challenges. We face 5 priorities all the time, and those 5 priorities are men, money, equipment, terrain, and time. Men, money, equipment, terrain, and time. And when you ask anyone in the National Guard about ranking those priorities, the answer is going to be every one of them are ranked number 1. The active component needs only to focus on training. Men, money, equipment, terrain are all provided to that commander, and the time is 24/7. The National Guard commander operates under severe limitations with all of those issues, with men and money and equipment in training areas and time with the soldiers. And at the same time, that commander has to balance his military mission with his soldiers' career jobs. It is a tough task. I would submit to you that a National Guard commander is a tougher task than an active duty commander. The requirement in the code is in the code because leaders who have experienced firsthand knowledge, who have wrestled with these constraints, are infinitely better equipped to lead the force. And I believe that's the reason why the requirement for 5 years National Guard experience is part of the requirement. This requirement is not meant to take care of our own. That's a little petty. There are, as General Hughes pointed out, there are many experienced, fully capable, combat experienced, federally recognized general officers within the National Guard that would certainly qualify for the ATAG position and for the Adjutant General position. The requirement is in the code, in my opinion, because it absolutely serves the best interests of the soldiers. And I respectfully request that you act in the best interests of the Georgia National Guard. I respectfully request that you act in the best interest of our patriotic citizen soldiers, and I respectfully ask that you not approve House Bill 800. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity, and I'm certainly open for questions.
We have had a number of presidents, United States presidents, as you well know, that have not served in the military, who became the commander-in-chief of our total armed forces, which includes our Marines, Army, Navy, and Air Force. How do you feel about that?
That is our Constitution. That is our form of government, and I have no issue with it. We've talked a lot about federal recognition. Let me point out that there are two types of general officers. There's adjutant generals, and as Representative Comer correctly pointed out, they don't have to be meet all the requirements of the Army. They are adjutant. They are federally recognized. Not federally recognized. They are AG officers. They are politically appointed. The case in Georgia as well. There's also general officers of the line. General officers of the line have to meet experience criteria, have to meet educational requirements, are appointed by the President, and confirmed by the Senate. General officers of the line, in the case of General Hughes and myself, are deployable assets. Adjutant generals are not deployable assets, so it's a different category. But to work at the table on the things that we face in terms of funding, and it's becoming more constrained, in terms of personnel, and it's becoming more and more constrained, you need a person with as much firepower as possible.
I guess my question is, if I'll use President Clinton, for example, or President Obama, a number of the Republican candidates running for president right now have no military experience whatsoever. Yet if they're elected president under our U.S. Constitution, they will become the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, which is a much higher, more responsibility than we're talking about here today. So if that would apply to the president, why would it not apply on a state level on an issue such as this?
Well, as far as commander-in-chief and the governor, it certainly applies. But you're asking specifically about the adjutant general.
Right, but that's a lower position than the commander-in-chief. So why would they be required to have all this experience if you can be president of the United States and have no military experience whatsoever and be commander-in-chief of our whole armed forces? Yeah. That's I'm trying to follow your logic there, and how if that would apply on the federal level, the governor, whether he had military experience, I guess, as commander-in-chief of the state, then why would it be a requirement to have all this military experience for someone of a lower position is my question.
And I appreciate your question. And actually, and what I'm trying to get back to is the Georgia Code. And the Georgia Code for Adjutant General states in part, no person shall be eligible to hold the office of Adjutant General unless he or she holds a federally recognized recognition at the rank of field grade or higher. So the Adjutant General's requirement is field grade or higher. Not the case with our current Adjutant General. He retired or left the active service as a captain. In the case of the Assistant Adjutant General, as I already mentioned, each Assistant Adjutant General at the time appointed shall be federally recognized officer with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel or higher. Certainly the case with our Assistant Adjutant General. Not the case with our Adjutant General. With not less than 5 years of continuous service of active service within the Georgia National Guard. So the issue here that we're raising is we have an appointment of an Assistant Adjutant General who has never served in the National Guard, and the point's well made that we are a joint service, but that is our requirement, and I've tried to make the case that it is important for us to have that requirement because of the unique nature of the National Guard. And in the case of the Adjutant General, federally recognized field grade or higher, which means Major, Lieutenant Colonel, or Colonel, and our Adjutant General is not the case. We're not the issue on our table today is not the Adjutant General. It is the provision of 5 years continuous service in the National Guard for the Assistant Adjutant General. And the point that we are trying to make is, yes, it is important for our unique citizen soldiers in Georgia.
I don't want to prolong this, Mr. Chairman. I'll conclude by saying it just seems to me like that if the President of the United States could serve as Commander-in-Chief and the Governor could serve as Commander-in-Chief, I guess that's the case. I know it is with the President. Without military experience, and to me it's perfectly logical to allow this individual to serve with whatever experience he has, because it's a much lesser position than the other two that are clearly allowed by our U.S. Constitution.
I think one thing I'll clear up there, Mr. Representative Smith says that our government is unique government, which we don't have a dictator over all the armies and everything. We have a civilian, and that's a distinction we have there. I will state one thing here, since I did meet with, we're not talking about really we're talking about the law, basically, but since it's been brought up, I talked to General Gerard, and I understand he was in National Guard in North Georgia College there up there for 2 years. I know that's not in a leadership position like you were talking about, but I just want to clear up that he has served. And I might say also that he and his twin brother and father in World War II had extensive military service. I just want to be sure that nobody thought we're not dealing with a top-notch gentleman here, and has done his duty with his country and everything.
And I appreciate that comment, and that was certainly not my intent. As I stated from the very beginning, I have no issues with the personalities with these individuals. I feel like it is important to keep this provision for experience within the National Guard for the reasons I've already stated.
Yeah, I just want to clear that up. Thank you. Is Mr. College next? Oh, he's next. Who's next?
I'll go next. General, I'm sorry, when you first said your name, I couldn't tell if you were saying Fieldman. Is that correct?
Thielman.
Thielman. Thank you, sir. General Thielman, thank you again for your service, and thank you for being here today and talking about this important issue. I just wanted to bring out one point, and it just kind of occurred to me as you were talking there at the end, but currently under 38-2-150, which is the Adjutant General's requirements, the TAG's requirements, not the A-TAG, the TAG requirement is that the TAG has to have served in the rank of field grade officer or equivalent in the organized militia of the state, the National Guard, in the armed forces of the United States or in a reserve component thereof. And that is the current requirement for the TAG. So in essence, what we're doing is making the A-TAG requirement match the TAG requirement in that the service can have been performed in any one of those components of the armed services. Is that? Do you agree with that?
That would have that effect.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Representative Collins.
Chairman, thank you again for being here as well. I just want to clear up for once and for all. This bill, and we're all rightfully understanding, has nothing to do with the TAG.
That's correct.
Thank you. Contingency requirements I believe is one of the foremost priorities of our armed services now, no matter the branch, and also from a reserve perspective, Guard perspective, or regular Army or Air Force. I think one of the issues that the Georgia National Guard, the 48th, and through the Air Guard at 165th at Savannah and others have distinguished themselves over the past few years in the AOR. It's not always been that way. And I think one of the issues that we've had, because we've had issues from Desert Storm back, and I think have come through those, and I think our folks now are performing wonderfully. One of the things that is interesting, and Mr. Chairman spoke of this a minute ago, and before anybody thinks there's any conspiracy here, I have known the Assistant TAG for longer than both of us probably would care to remember, back since 7th grade. So there's no hidden thought out there. I'm putting it up front. His twin brother is currently the commander of Delta Force. He has served himself several tours on different arenas and also went back as a civilian, which, as he knew when I told him he was crazy, and he went back into Afghanistan to serve with General Petraeus and others from a civilian perspective. I understand, and listening to your concerns, but isn't, especially in this situation, because whether we like it or not, we're going to sort of the highlight to the person that was picked here. And dealing with this bill and dealing with requirements, but the person that was picked here, I believe, is eminently qualified to keep the Georgia Guard on the forefront, tip of the spear, for where we are going, and we don't know where we're going right now. Is there any reason that you can state right now that the Assistant TAG would not be a good representative of the National Guard and the Georgia Bureau? Would it be any reason that he would not have the qualifications to motivate, lead, and inspire his troops to do the job that he's currently been asked to do?
Well, you're talking specific individuals, and like I mentioned, I've just met him for the first time here just a few minutes ago, and very personable, and I have no issue with his record or performance, and I will agree with everything you said. I think, based upon your knowledge, you have much more than I. If you think he's qualified, if the governor and the adjutant general thinks he's qualified, I have no issue with that. What I do have the issue with is, as I've already mentioned, is there's some unique issues and challenges that the active Army faces, and I was on active Army. There's some unique issues that the National Guard faces, and I was in the National Guard. And I think to better serve our National Guard services, we need to have a person who understands those unique issues, has faced them, and can deal with them. And that's really what we're saying.
And I agree with you on that point as well. I deal with that. And one of the things that had came out of some of the discussions was that there was this somehow a different standard, and that was the way it came across to me, and to be very frank with you, it bothered me greatly, that there's a different standard when dealing with a reservist or a National Guardsman as opposed to a regular Army or regular Air Force. And I take great umbrage with that. That was indicated to me that was a concern. I think one of the things that is an interesting issue here is I've worked for both, I've worked for active and I've worked for reservists, and actually we had guardsmen that I worked with as well. I think the bottom line is, in the world we're going to, we're all active in a very real sense. 40-something to 50-something% of the AOR right now is staffed and met with what we will call the reserve component, both the Guard and reserves. I think it's a distinction, yes, but I think it is also something that we're moving toward, that actually sometimes the regular Army or regular Air Force has an insight that is good in the reservist side, just as likewise that we also have the opportunities as well. So that is my concern here, and I think I think what would happen without this pick by this governor and without the working that we're doing in this bill that was offered by Representative Hatchett, we would not have had the experience and the qualifications of a man such as Joe Girard. And I think that's what brought it to the forefront, and that's why I just wanted to emphasize the contingency level experience and the active real war that we're still going through to this day, and especially drawdowns, which was just developed, which is a whole issue. So I think that is the part that I'm believing he is uniquely qualified to be in this position, and would not have been uniquely qualified if we were not able, and this governor was not able to be allowed to pick him. And that's the part that I see, or him or anyone else in his unique qualifications. And I think that was what was, I think, being said earlier by Representative Hatchett. I yield.
Is any other questions of General Thielman? Representative Hatchett, do you have any comments or whatever at this point? Thank you, sir.
I would like to say that I do wish for your positive vote on this, and I do have the utmost confidence in our governor and administration that the right decision has been made, and by the present tag that our assistant adjutant general is the man for the job. Thank you.
Yes, you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make one comment before we go to vote. I'm going to vote, excuse me, in support of this resolution. I think I may be unique here in that I'm probably the only one that served in both the Guard and active duty in both the Air Force and the Army, and I'm comfortable with this bill. And while I understand that this shouldn't be personal, I also find it difficult for it not to be personal, as I'm staring across the room here and I see parachute wings, which I think are master jump wings. I see a Ranger tab. I see a Bronze Star. I'm pretty sure that if you were wearing your BDUs, you'd have more than one patch that you could put on your right arm, and that means something. And so I am completely comfortable and have confidence in the decision that the governor has made, and I think that we should vote in accordance with that. Thank you.
I want to say before we go any further that I appreciate everybody's input, and I appreciate the fact that everybody was fair and everybody kept it cool and handled this in a proper business-like manner. And I think we had a thorough hearing of this bill, and I want to thank everybody who participated. At this time, I recognize Representative Hatchett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call motion approval of HB 800. Substitute.
Did he move? I did. Yeah, he moved for passage. You want to be recognized? Or who was it? You have a second? All those in favor of the House Bill 800 substitute to House Bill 800, if you're for this, raise your right hand. Looks like it's unanimous. So this will go on to the next step in the process. And once again, I want to say I appreciate everybody's input, and the fact is that it did it in such a orderly manner. We are adjourned.